Protective Services is all about protecting innocent kids. So why are y'all talking about it on Brokish? And are y'all really about to have a whole show comparing CPS to the problems we have with the police and the defund the police movement? And even if CPS is problematic, ain't the real problem Black parents that don't take care of their kids? Well, we're going to talk about it after the break.
They say when you wear Black Power Media gear, you can accomplish anything. You can play any and every position. Coaching, to kicking, to receiving, to running and juking. And, oh my goodness, I see how to get in slow motion. Get off me. And you're going to have a lot of haters coming at you. But what you got to do is you got to shake them off, and get to your goal and accomplish it. And when that's done, it's a beautiful thing. I'm talking about going hard, extra, for that extra point. And when it's done beautifully, you talking about touchdown. Oh, and the crowd goes wild and they're celebrating with you and everything. Man, let's see that again. Nice.
Black Power Media, baby. That's how we do it.
Now go to blackpowermedia.org and get you some of that gear. Empower yourself today. Yeah.
Brokers, welcome to another episode of Brokish, where we talk about the unbelievable ish this country has done to keep us broke. Now here are your hosts, Amber and Erika.
Hey y'all, I'm Amber.
And I'm Erika.
And on Brokish today, y'all, we are talking about something that, quite frankly, we don't talk about enough. We are shedding light on CPS, or Child Protective Services as is known. And although this is an agency that rarely comes up when we're talking about social justice, criminal justice reform, and even things like defunding the police and more equity in our criminal and quasi-criminal systems, it would probably surprise many of you to know just how many Black families, particularly vulnerable Black families, are impacted by dealings and encounters with Child Protective Services. But so often we don't talk about how some of their problematic and racially insensitive and inequitable policies often affect us the most. And so today we are here to shed light on it and have a conversation with somebody who is in the thick of it, doing the work to make sure that our children and our families have a voice and are protected.
Amber, you shaking tables today, ain't you, girl? You coming in here talking about, you don't love the children and you got so many of them.
At some point I'm going to break out into I believe the children are our future. But, it's odd because I used to be a prosecutor. And when we were brainstorming this episode, I had honestly forgotten how problematic, I'll just say that, sometimes CPS can be. I started out my criminal justice career in family violence court. And so I had a lot of interrelations and interconnectedness with people from CPS. And so I had kind of stored all of that away in my don't ever work for the government again trauma. So pulling that out to talk about it today and just kind of preparing for this episode has reminded me of so much of that craziness. And I think it's time for us to tell the people about it.
Well, Amber, I know this is a part of the show where we normally, kind of shoot the poo with each other, but I feel like we've kind of already gotten started in on the topic. So, why don't we just bring up our guests and just get to it, right? You ain't been up to nothing, no way. So,
child, I ain't doing nothing. Okay.
Exactly.
Exactly. 500 kids.
Exactly. So y'all, with us today, we have Amanda Wallace, and Amanda received her bachelor's of social work from the University of North Carolina at Greensboro with a 10-year career as a child abuse investigator. So she is not new to this. Amanda worked throughout several counties in North Carolina. While working on the front lines protecting children from abuse and neglect, Amanda simultaneously protected families from the oppressive child protection system. Watching the rights of families decrease and the power of CPS increase, she realized that she had become the silent enforcer of this oppressive system. How many of us have looked around and realized that was true about what we were doing? And it was then that Amanda understood the system and the perceived power given to CPS by society. The insider knowledge that she has truly helps families to understand this movement, Stop CPS. The knack of knowledge of the system makes fear a natural response when families encounter CPS. That same fear fosters compliance with unlawful and unethical CPS policies. So, y'all, we are very excited to have Amanda with us today to talk to us about Stop CPS, to talk to us about the movement, and to talk to us about how we can help to protect families. Amanda, welcome to Brokish.
Hello, thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation. Definitely.
So, yes, and I know that I've gone through some of your background, but I just love to hear more of your story on your own terms. So, how did you working for CPS turn into stopping them?
Yeah, I mean, I'm gonna tell you, 2 years ago, I would not believe that I was found in Operation Stop CPS, right? But, just being in this work and just continuing, like they train you to do a job. Right. I was trained to do a job and I did my job. I did it well. Like I said, 10 years in this system, 3 different counties, understanding how it works. But then I got to a place where I feel like I came to a personal awakening where I realized that like something is not right here. Like something is not adding up. Why is it that these families are the ones that we're going to their homes and taking their children away when the same thing is happening over here and we're not here, right? And so all of these things started to happen in my professional life that was just was clashing with my personal life. Because when I went home, I still had to think about the fact of what I was doing at work, right? It's still all together. And so it came to a point where I took a child into custody that I knew was safe, right? I knew this child was safe and I fought tooth and nail. Like I wrote the petition under duress, right? I wrote it under duress and I gave it to the judge. And I remember like just sitting there and I was on the phone and I'm like, I know he's going to sign it. I know that what's in this petition is not grounds to take someone's child away, but I know he's going to sign it. And he signed it. And then we had custody of a child. And when I remember like the family calling me because I refused to go pick her up. But like, I remember them calling me like, why is this happening? And not having an answer. And when like that, at that point, I went out on FMLA and I said I needed to figure something else out. The name Operation Stop CPS had not even been thought about at the time. I got a whiteboard, the whiteboard that's back here right now, and just put every idea like that was in my head of how can I fix this? Because, people get out of this system and then they go do something else. But how do I take the knowledge that I have and give it to families, the same families that I feel like now was working against. And so that's how like Operation Stop CPS was birthed. And so Operation Stop CPS was launched. And the next day in the Responding Power Guide, we wrote the Responding Power Guide, which like a play-by-play for families of how to interact with CPS. The next day we were locked out of our computers and put on administrative leave. Quick. It happened very quickly, right?
How did they even find all this? How did they find out what you were doing?
Because we went public with, Operation, we launched it. People that we knew what we were doing. And so it got back to the powers that be at our agency. Yep. And we were locked. I couldn't even do my time sheet. Like I was like, oh, okay. And so, we were put on admin leave for 2 weeks. We had a hearing and at that hearing, the child that I took into custody, and that's how I say how the universe works. The child that I took into custody was living in the building when I went in for my administrative hearing, and she walked past the door, and I said, I know that I'm not supposed to be in this position anymore because it was my actions that put this child in this building, living on a cot with no family ties or family relations, right? And so at that point, it was just full steam ahead at that point, to get children back into the custody of their parents.
So let me ask you this, Amanda, because I remember when I used to do my jury trial voir dire in my criminal cases, when I would try to explain to the panel what the burden of proof is and how in criminal cases, like beyond a reasonable doubt is the highest burden of proof. Mm-hmm. And so I would kind of start with the different levels. And one of the things that used to always shock people was that the standard required to take people's children away was less than the standard required to criminally convict someone. So the standard to take people's children away is clear and convincing evidence, which is somewhere between preponderance of the evidence, which is just like 50.3%, and then beyond a reasonable doubt. And I would always have to like regather them and regroup them because they were so shocked. And so one of the things I'm wondering is, in your line of work, are you shocked at how little people know about what it takes, and really how little it takes for CPS to intervene in people's family and take their children or otherwise put, restrictions on their ability to freely parent? Like, does that shock you?
Yeah, it does. I mean, I don't think it shocks me anymore because like now, like I'm like, okay, I get it. You don't get it. Right. But like when I first started this work, and people were just like, well, it has to be a reason. It has to be a reason why they had their child taken away. And it's like, well, no. And I think even for me, like the first case that we had with Operation Stop CPS, it was a 2-day-old baby that got ripped from his mother's hands because the nurses said she was impolite after giving birth. Right.
Who isn't? Who isn't?
I was about to say, I mean,
right. So she was impolite after giving birth, and that required a call to CPS, which then triggered law enforcement to come to the hospital and surround this mother, rip her child out of her arms, which we were able to witness on body cam footage, and that child going into foster care, right?
At 2 days old.
At 2 days old. And so when you think about, well, and I remember having this conversation about preponderance of evidence with her attorney, and they're like, it's just what they say. It's really low. And it's like, but she didn't do anything, right? Like there's no evidence, right? And it's the power of what the social worker says, the power of what they can make the evidence look like, right? And and that's what I try to teach people is I was in that position. It was, what did I see? And then what did I tell my supervisor that I saw? And then we were able to come up with a narrative to then this is the direction the case needed to go in. And so, yeah, it's helping people understand the power of words and what we make as evidence.
And there are so many, I want to ask you 10 different questions just based off of that one story. But probably throughout this show, I feel like my role here is going to be to ask the questions of everybody who wants to be the devil's advocate, right? Like, don't y'all want to keep the kids safe? Like, do you want a high burden as it relates to children? Why do you want there to have to be mountains of evidence that a child who many times can't advocate for themselves, for there to have to be that in order for you to find a safe place for them? I don't believe this, Amanda, but I'm asking you the questions. You get what I'm saying?
Right. Well, because if you look at the research, you see that when children go into foster care, they don't do any better, right? They don't do any, but they actually do worse. And so if you take a child from a home, which most of the time, again, if you look at the statistics, it's for neglect, poverty related concerns. It's not that children are out here being abused and there's a whole bunch of evidence. It's because of a lack of resources that children are coming into this system. And so if you take a child because of lack of resources and then put them in foster care where they're then abused and neglected in foster care, why wouldn't you try your best to keep this child with their family and give the family the resources that they need? Because the biggest thing I think with Operation Stop CPS and so many other organizations in this fight is the propaganda, going against the propaganda that the system is needed, right? That there's this need to protect children. The community is what's needed to protect children. If a child is unsafe in our community, then we have failed as a community, not just the family. We got to go back to our tribal roots, right? Where we took care of our own. And so, yeah, that's why there should be a whole bunch of evidence. There should be calls to the grandmother, the aunt, the uncle, the extended family before this child comes out of their family.
Yeah.
And Amanda, one quick thing just related to the story that you told about the mother. And you mentioned that it sounded to me like this was a cop drama. You and your boss get together and y'all kind of craft, like say, what kind of story we piecing together to try to. And so I know literally you were an agent of the state, but can you talk to us a little bit about how you all really are sort of de facto facto police as it relates to people dealing with their children.
Oh yeah, like so most child welfare agencies have memorandums of agreements with law enforcement that they share information straight to law enforcement. All of your records could go straight to law enforcement. So
you don't need like a subpoena.
No.
You don't need a judge's order. You don't. Okay.
You don't need anything. You just need to, the law enforcement officer will call, and usually they'll call the social worker to say, hey, what did you find? Or, what do you think? And then that person acts as the investigator and gives that information to law enforcement. And then they move forward with that. Law enforcement and social services have meetings called multidisciplinary teams that they come and they sit around the table and talk about cases. They are very ingrained with one another. There's been times where I've gone to the school with law enforcement and they can't go talk to a child by themselves, but I can go and they can go with me to talk to a child. So it's definitely, they have the friendly social worker has gone on the forefront of these investigations to make it look like it's not law enforcement when it is.
So you all you can essentially subvert whatever laws are in place so that people have to have the right representation with them and all of that. And you can just show up and do that without, wow. Okay.
She's not a sworn peace officer. So Miranda does not apply. Mm-hmm. And a lot of times what people don't realize is not only is there an interrelationship, but there's an intersectionality that penalizes particularly Black women. Like when I was in family violence court, we would alert CPS in family violence cases where the aggressor or the offender was being prosecuted. And a lot of times if we had children who might have witnessed the violence. And so as we all know, usually by the time it gets to court, it's not the first time. So you have a woman now who has the courage to finally stand up to an offender, to somebody who's probably had her in a cycle of abuse for a long time. And how is she rewarded? By having an ancillary CPS case opened up against her while she's trying to get free from the abuse. And so a lot of people do not realize that there is an interrelationship that sometimes punishes people that are actually trying to get out of bad situations. Amanda, have you seen any of that, like related to domestic violence, related to women who are trying to leave bad situations and then have CPS investigations opened up on them while they're literally going through the criminal process?
Yeah, it's actually a case that we're working here in Durham. This mom, she had her 2 children taken away in 2019 because she was a victim of domestic violence. She's trying to leave her abuser. She goes to her mother's home to get away, and CPS comes and kicks her out of her mother's home and places her children with the grandmother, right? And so she has nothing, but now she has even more of nothing. Now she doesn't even have housing. And so they're there with the grandmother for about a year and a half. Mom is doing her services, doing everything, but they still say they're not safe enough to go with their mother. But then the perpetrator wants mom back, and she's saying no. And he goes to the caseworker and makes up lies, right? And says, hey, we're over at the grandmother's house and they're not safe over there, without any pieces of evidence. They go and rip those kids from their grandmother's house. It's on recording. Rips the kids from the grandmother's house. And now they've been in 5 different foster homes at this point, and with no reunification. And again, so that's an active case right here. Almost 3 years of these children being in foster care when all their mother was doing was trying to get away from domestic violence and get some safety. So instead of giving her resources, they take her children away. It doesn't make any sense. And so she now has to wait until December 5th. She just went to court. So now her trial is December 5th and 6th in Durham, North Carolina, to fight to get her children returned to her.
Yeah. And when other women who are victims of abuse hear things about this, then what they do is they suck it up and take it. Mm-hmm. Because they are afraid that the price they're going to pay for calling the police or showing up to testify. I can't tell you how many times I prepped a case and the witnesses didn't show up. And then you start figuring out why. A lot of these women are afraid they're going to face evictions. If somebody who's on the lease gets family violence conviction, they're afraid their children are going to get taken from them. They're afraid that they're going to lose benefits. And a lot of times people don't realize that it's other agents of the state fueling these fears. Criminal defense attorneys who are lying to these women, telling them if you show up, CPS is going to take your kids from you. Or, the police calling and frightening them. And so I'm so glad that you're doing this work, because there are so many people hiding in the shadows because they're afraid that if they come forward and tell their stories, the price they're going to pay is losing their kids.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So Amanda, can you take us back just a little bit to tell us exactly what Operation Stop CPS is, what you all are? We've heard some of the stories, but just more about your mission and what you're doing.
Yeah, so our mission is to expose this system, right? Like, just play it off the bat, right? Our mission is to expose, like, the systematic oppression and, like, be the anti-propaganda that is out there, that CPS is needed, that foster parents are helping children. And we do that by, one, using like social media, using our voice and being able to be a collective voice for families, but also individually, especially in Durham, North Carolina. We work with individual families to create change campaigns for them. And so that looks like that looks different in every case. It could look like, helping families first it helps you help them understand their case, because so many families go to court and they have no idea what's going on. Right? They have no idea what's going on. They don't know what part of the process they're in. And so it's really first getting a copy of their case file and saying, this is where you are. Right? And now what plan do you want to come up with to get your children back? What has to happen? And like being very detailed. And then that's also starting to have communications with the social worker, going to meetings with the family to help them stay empowered and use their voice. And then it's getting the court of public opinion involved, and saying, hey, this is the actual story. This is the narrative that they don't want to tell. And so how do we all come together to push for change and put the power into the hands of the people? And so as of, today, we've had, since the launch of Operation Stop CPS on May 13th of 2021, we've had 13 children come home that have been in the system. And so we are very, we just continue to want to, push forward to get even more children home from this system, because it's what's needed. There's so much attention that goes to the foster care system. There's a lot of statistics and everything, but I have been an investigator the whole time that I was working for the system. Like, I never went to any other area. And so I understand that the leak is in the beginning. It's the investigation. If there wasn't a phone call to CPS that triggered their authority, then they wouldn't have the power.
So again, to play this role that
Did she go off screen for you too?
yes.
Okay.
Just give me 1 minute. I'll just say. Got in my throat. I'm sorry.
Oh, no, you're fine. Okay. I'm just glad you're all right. So, Amanda, I think, as you've shared with us, certainly probably 9.5 times out of 10, like you're saying, there probably isn't a reason for a child to have been stripped from their family. But there are some legitimate cases where children are being abused and are not safe. So talk us through what the world looks like when there are those situations and how we or whoever comes in to help remedy that in the absence of something like a CPS or a police force.
So there should be community organizations in the community that are able to deal with any problem that arises, right? And so what we tell people is that you should be aware of the community organizations that are really doing the work, not the ones that, have TV commercials or things like that, but Who do you know that is really doing the work in your community? And then going to them. One of the biggest things or red flags that I would say is community organizations that require a referral from DSS in order for families to get services. That is a red flag, and you should try to find someone else because, again, it's attached to this system. And so in the absence, a lot of times when it comes to CPS, you are dealing with the consequence of a problem versus the actual problem. And so what we tell families is, what is the real problem, right? You might see that a mom has now spanked her child and left a mark. But why did that happen? Are you stressed out because you're working too much? Are you having some money problems? Like, what is going on? And so it's really getting to the root of that, and then also having a support system that is able to take on some of those, the burdens or some of the issues that you might be having. But again, we have to, I'm very strong when it comes to this system has to be abolished. Like there are situations where children are in situations that might not be the best, but who are we to say what is best, right? For a child, that's like the first thing that we have to think about is who makes the rules, who says that this is what is sufficient, what is not sufficient. Cause that was one of the major issues in this system is that people would always laugh. They were like, well, if Amanda's taking somebody's child, it has to be a problem. And it's the truth. You need to fix this. Right? This is your child. And if somebody has to fix it for you, that's the problem. Safety is not the absence of all issues. Safety is the presence of protective factors to deal with any issues that may arise for your child. And so if you do not have the necessary resources to deal with that stress, then you have to build those in place before the crisis happens. But because we are in this state of brokish, right? Or we're in this state of we're always a paycheck away from, a crisis that looks different for people that are at a different socioeconomic class. But this system knows that. That's why they're targeted. Mm-hmm. That's why they're targeted. And so, we're doing work here in Durham in the school system because, again, they're the number one mandated reporter. That's where a lot of these cases come from. And so it's how can we make the school system a pillar of the community where they're not calling CPS or being reporters, but they can be responders. If a child if you're concerned that the child's house is dirty, well, then if you're not going to go clean it up, then it's not your business, right? We really have to get that. With teachers, or if you're worried that this child is hungry, if you're not going to get them food, then it's not your business. If you're not going to solve the problem, then you need to leave it up to the people who are responsible for this child.
And I also think you raise a great point because I think sometimes people who are mandated reporters don't always see the analysis through to the end. Mm-hmm. I know my husband went into the system because he came to school in his grandmother's clothes. His mother was drug addicted. He was wearing the same clothes over and over. And he finally went to school one day in female clothes, clearly adult clothes when he was in second grade. And the teacher reported it and they went into foster care and very horrible things happened to them in foster care. And it was years before he was reunited with his siblings with their grandmother. But again, that wasn't an ideal situation too. And so it's very interesting to hear you talk about that. If you see a child in need, is there an easier question to answer? What do we do if this is a child that needs clothes or food or, might need a place to have a shower? Is there a way that we can meet this need without sometimes putting them into situations that are worse than where they're coming from? Because then you take children who have needs and you put them in foster homes where they are subject to all manner of things. And the gag is the actual need still doesn't get met because a lot of those children are still housing insecure, food insecure. Now it's just amplified by a whole bunch of other issues. And so I think that's very true that we need to train mandated reporters to think through to the whole end of the analysis because I don't think a lot of times they do.
But there's no connection in a lot of spaces in terms of, if we take teachers as a population of mandated reporters, right? Oftentimes, in these suburban streets, these teachers don't necessarily live in the neighborhoods and the cities even where they're working with children. And so as y'all are talking, I'm just thinking through in my head, and I know I'm limited in my imagination. And so God forgive me for that. But I do think it's important. Yes. Step in, provide, like, y'all don't have clothes at y'all's school. Y'all don't, all these sorts of things. Like, I know that are resources at the school where my kids go, but I'm like, somebody coming in from the outside isn't going to have that same sense of responsibility for that child, because you're a student, but beyond that, we don't have a relationship. So it's making me think about the things we lost with desegregation and the lack of Black teachers in the schools. Like, all of these things are swirling in my head as y'all are talking about the ramifications decades later of how this actually plays out.
Yeah.
I don't have a question. I'm just thinking.
Yeah. And and we go back to the past and you think of how, like, we got here, right? Like, the Child Protective Services is a continuation of slavery, right? It's the new auction block. And when it comes to, like, the welfare system, so Arthur Fleming, he was the Secretary of the Department of Health and Human Services, and he came up with the Fleming Rule after 23,000 children were kicked off of the Louisiana rolls, right? And so that had been happening all across the country, but because it was so many, they were able to get national attention for the issue. And because of that, the Fleming Rule said that you couldn't just deny a woman or a family for services just because the government said they were unsuitable. And what unsuitable meant was you were Black, right? in that time, right? And so, and now in order to get services, the government was able to come into your home, assess your home, and give you services to make your home suitable to them. And so you didn't see any of, like, the definition for battered child. You didn't see any of these laws or, happening until the 1960s when the civil rights movement was happening, because the Child Protective Services was a formation to attack the Black family. You take away a Black child, their mother can't fight for the liberation of her people. You take away this Black child, the father is dehumanized because he can't do anything to get his child back. Like, this was systematic, and this scheme has been, like, it's a very well protected scheme that has been able to attack the Black family. And now, because it is working so well, everybody is a victim at this point, because it comes down to the money. The federal government gives billions, trillions of dollars to fix this problem that they've created. And it looks like salaries. It looks like salaries. That's what it looks like.
And along the money lines, too, one of the questions I have for you is, people don't realize how expensive it is to try to fight CPS. It costs money to get a family lawyer. It costs money to request those public records and go back and keep requesting them, and then get court orders when they deny it, or write the letter in a way that they'll respond. And so talk about the struggle that a lot of the families you work with have in advocating for their children or trying to get reunification, because that shit is expensive.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It is. I mean, it's hard to even find an attorney, period, that's going to go up against CPS. And then, when you find them, they want $20,000, $30,000 for a retainer. I mean, and you got people that qualify for food stamps and Medicaid, but you want $20,000 to retain an attorney. Like, it doesn't add up. And so, like, that's why we've had to become creative, and, like, these parents are now turning into attorneys for themselves, and they have to be able to, like, learn the law specific to their case and fight back, because if they continue to wait to save up that amount of money, like, we put up a GoFundMe, but that's not going to do it, right? In the amount of time that we need it. And so families are just having to become their own protection and their own savings, because it's too expensive. It's way too expensive until we find an attorney that's willing to do it pro bono and just, take this whole system down. But yeah, it's extremely expensive.
Amber, where your volunteer hours at? I know you're not You not certified in the state of North Carolina, but where your volunteer hours at, you know?
Since I'm a CASA, I'm coming up on the homework, but I'm a CASA. I'm doing what I can.
I need to ask Amanda. Are CASA advocates the cops too, Amanda? Look.
See, no, you can't ask me that, Wallace. You said she's a CASA.
Look.
Let me tell you why. Let me tell you why I'm a CASA, because I'm a CASA for the same reasons that you talk about. Like, there needs to be people who know what is going on, who understand the system, and who understand the system ain't shit, there to speak that language and oftentimes offer insight into what is going on. Mm-hmm. And so I feel like my role in advocating for the child a lot of times has absolutely nothing to do with advocating for the child to be in the system, but to bring up stuff that other people with credentials behind their name who the court might be inclined to listen to don't bring up. Like, don't move this child to a foster home like we're here in Dallas. Don't move this child to a foster home in Grand Prairie when they have teachers who have been helping them in Dallas, in this particular school district. If they have a family member who's willing to take them, let them stay where they are, close to their community, close to people they're connected with, close to people who are helping them. Like, don't just put them 30 or 40 miles away from everybody who knows them and who loves them. And so I try to do, that's the position I try to take, like to try to do things that help bring perspective. That's like, you know, on paper, this makes perfect sense. So on paper, it's only 15 miles to you. But if the kid mama ain't got no car, it might as well be another state. Mm-hmm. It might as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's what, when a case that we had in North Carolina where the children came home, well, the guardian ad litem, similar to the CASAs, they recommended the children to come home because they were able to see past all the bullshit, right? And they were able to recommend that. And if you have people on the team, even if they're on the other side, that understand it, things work a whole lot faster for the family. And, you know, and so we got to have people that infiltrate the system on the inside too.
Yes. Or
until we burn it down.
Exactly. But people, you forget how sometimes people are inoculated by privilege to things they don't even know. Like, I remember one time I heard a DA say, all she has to do is get a new apartment. And I'm thinking, like, that's rent. That's a deposit.
In 2022, I hope it wasn't.
That's new utilities. Like, it's not all you have to do is get an apartment. Like, for some people, a deposit is prohibitive. That's not just a check. That's check, Like, and so people say things like that. And it's like, you need people there to be like, but it's not that simple. Right. Because when you say to somebody, all you have to do is get an apartment, or if you really wanted your kids back, you would do it. Well, then what is she supposed to do? Go pick up pennies or something, like, until it adds up to a deposit, to enough rent, to enough money to get into an apartment? And so sometimes, yes, you do need people who can be like, Haley, sit down. Because clearly you ain't never been on the struggle side of things. Talking about it's just an apartment. Go ahead and have a seat.
Or they could take the resources that they were going to give to the foster parents.
Exactly.
And give it to the parents to actually pay the deposit. And then that's the problem, right?
Y'all know they can't do that because that's a handout to a welfare queen. So that cannot happen.
Yeah. Right.
So, Amanda, when you were talking about some of the history of like going into people's houses to see if they're fit and sort of like overseeing all of this, I had in my spirit a lot of colonial vibes. It almost seems like there's this domestic colonization that happens as it relates to CPS, right? So them determining, you know, your culture shouldn't be what it is. Your house shouldn't be what it is. Your environment shouldn't be what it is. Let me come and show you the way. You know, let me come and save you from yourself. So can you talk to us about how do we, as we burn it down, how do we decolonize all of this and bring up what we want to see?
So the first thing that we have to do in order to decolonize ourselves is to stop, like, we got to resist the system. And so we got to stop opening our doors to child protective services and answering those questions, right? Like if they're knocking on your door, they shouldn't be asking you about substance use and mental health and, all of these things. That's how you have to be able to resist, is to not give them information. The system feeds off of information. And, so again, stopping that's what we talk about in the Respond and Power Guide is, they shouldn't be coming into your house. Like they, a lot of times.
Most people don't even know they have the right to not let them in.
Yeah, and that's a part of it. We got to understand our rights. Like, we are free people, right? We are free people, and these people are agents, right? But we got to be free in our minds, right? And that's we got to be free in our minds. And if I am a free person, you can't come to my house and come inside and ask me anything about mine, especially if I know I didn't do anything wrong. And if we have more people that postured that way, they wouldn't feel so confident in making laws that gave them that power, right? And so, because, I always say, like, these laws, everybody wants to fight to change the laws, and that's great. But the law gives this false sense of protection that, that something's going to protect you. We are going to protect us. And it's also at the same time creating like protection in our own communities. If somebody, like we're doing some work in a community here in Durham, and we tell people, if you see the car coming through this neighborhood, or if you see somebody from CPS coming in here, everybody should be alerted that they need to leave, and everybody should be on alert until they get out of here, because they can't leave with one of our children, right? It has to be that like ingrained in us that we got to take power. We say community control of our children. And when we have community control of our children, nobody from the government can tell us what to do with them, right? Because they're our babies. It's good.
Oh, no, I was just going to say a piece of free legal advice. I tell people all the time, the government, this white supremacist government we're in, is not inclined to ask you anything. They're demanding. So whenever there is a question, that means they have determined that they are not in a place where they have the right to demand it. So whenever there's a question, you have the right to say no. That's why I always, when people are like, well, the police said that, they're asking me to talk. I'm like, well, if they had enough evidence, they wouldn't be asking you.
Right. You'd be already in cuffs.
Under arrest already, right? So whenever they come asking, they're asking because they don't have enough power to demand. Because if they had enough power to demand, they would not request it. So whenever there is a request, can I come into your house? No. Can I talk to you? No. Mm-hmm. My favorite is just ask them back, am I under arrest? And if you ain't under arrest, goodbye.
Right.
Goodbye. That's it. Goodbye.
Mm-hmm. And that's what a lot of people have, this fear that if they don't open their door, if they don't talk to CPS, then they'll just automatically take their children. Well, no, right? You got to understand the process. That somebody made a report. You don't know who made the report. They made a report of allegations, and you have a right to interfere with an investigation if it's lawful. And a lawful interference is the fact that you didn't do anything wrong and you didn't break the law. And so you, like what we say in the Respond and Power Guide is, it's as simple as going to court and proving your case, right? I am interfering in this investigation because of X, Y, and Z, because I know that I didn't do X, Y, and Z. Like, and this does not meet the abuse and neglect statute, right? It's as simple as somebody making a phone call. The person that picks up the phone call, they type up the report. They go walk to their supervisor's office, and they talk about what somebody said. And then based on the two of them, they determine if this report comes in, and that gives the government the authority to come to your house, right? But the reality is these two people have so much bias, an inherent bias inside of them to determine if this is abuse and neglect. There have been times where, like, I've been in agencies where the intake people don't believe in spankings, right? They don't believe that children should have a spanking. So even though it's very clear that it's not against the law, because of their belief, those cases could come in, versus if you're in another county and like that's not a belief of that county. I was in a county where the intake supervisor said, well, regardless of what the allegations are, if it uses a certain word, we're going to take it. So that's just made up, right? This is just something that they came up with that day. But this is what we try to tell people, is that it is up to us. It is up to the people to fight back against this. They will never give up their power. They'll never surrender their power to the people. We are the ones that are going to have to educate ourselves and act differently. Like when we start to act differently to this system, they will start to act differently to the people. Stop opening your doors in 2022. Stop opening your doors in 2023. Like we have to be able to move different.
Do you think the fact that they move different is why some of the white families don't get put into the system in the same way that Black families do, because they feel more empowered to tell them, no, you're not coming into my house. No, you're not talking to my child. Even though some of the complaints against them are actually valid complaints, what you talk about is that ability and that confidence to be disruptive, oftentimes works in their favor. Have you seen that in your work?
Yes, most definitely. Like when we were thinking about Operation Stop CPS, we said for like Black and brown families, we have like, it's so much more work, because first we got to explain that you have the right, right? Like you have the right to fight back. And then but for white families, they already know. They're already fighting back. We were doing work in the community, and I was trying to tell this father, I'm like, hey, don't open your door. He's like, oh no, I'm gonna open it. I'm like, well, but don't open your door. He's like, no, they just come in, they check the cabinets, they check and see, and they ask me some questions, and then I go, and I don't want no trouble with them. I'm like, but what does that teach your children, right? That these people are able to come into your home, ask questions, like it's just generational. And it didn't start with this generation. It's already ingrained that we're supposed to open our doors, and the government has this power over us as Black and brown people. And that's what we got to fight against. There's been so many times where a white family can get a high powered attorney and get their case closed, right? Or not even have a high powered attorney, send a very powerful email, right? and get their case closed. And so it's the nature of the beast.
Well, propaganda teaches us that if you cooperate with the police, that, they're going to be more lenient. And on all the cop shows, they tell you, if you're innocent and you don't have anything to hide, then why aren't you cooperating with an investigation? That is what we all learn on all these silly shows that we're watching. But so that we can fight against that. Tell us what the guide says. Tell us what your guide, take us through what we need to know.
Right. So if CPS calls you and says that you are under investigation, the first thing you need to do is not answer any questions. You need to start asking questions. You need to ask the supervisor's information, name, email address. You need the director's name, email address, program managers, name and email address, because these are all of the people that you are going to contact to demand that they leave you alone. And so then you want to ask the allegations verbatim, right? Verbatim from the report. And a lot of social workers will tell you that they can't give you this information, and that they have to tell you in person. But you have to remind them of CAPTA, the federal law that says that at first contact, they must tell you what you are accused of. And it doesn't say at first face-to-face contact. It says at first contact. And so if they're calling you on the phone, you are entitled to that information. And so you write all the allegations down verbatim, and then you go look at the law, right? The whatever state you are in, look at the statute as it relates to abuse and neglect, and you compare, right? Does what somebody alleged against you meet what the law says abuse and neglect is? If it doesn't, then you need to contact them and say, I'm not speaking with you. This was an intake error. This should not have been screened in. I would like to speak to your director, your program manager. We need to discuss why you're not going to see my children, right? And then you need to go pick up your children if they're at school and ask for a virtual option until this case is behind you, because CPS will go to the school to try to speak to your children. Now, if you look at the allegations and you compare it to what the law says, and there might be some gray area, and you're like, okay, well, maybe there's something happened here. You can't fight it as clearly. Then we would recommend you definitely consult with an attorney before you speak to CPS at all. Find somebody that has like a free consultation. Be very clear about what it is. Like, you only got 30 minutes to an hour about what the allegations are, and what you are looking for from an attorney. And then you prepare for that initiation, right? You prepare for that first contact. You should always have a witness. You should always record it, video and audio, recording it. You don't want them inside of your home. If the allegations allege an issue with the condition of your home, take a picture or a video. Like, I don't allow people in my home. That's just it. And you just sit outside. You don't allow them to speak to your child without you being present, which they will try to push to speak to people, separately. No, we're a family and we're going to address this as a family. You only address the allegations, right? You only address the allegations. They will tell you, well, we got to have a holistic approach. We got to ask you all these questions. We got to know about, everything about your life. No, right? No, I'm fine. I have my own therapist, right? I got my own situation happening, right? And so you just address the allegations and then you ask them to cease and desist immediately. I don't want, you contacting me. Don't contact my family. Don't contact anybody associated with me. I intend to sue you for violating my rights if you continue with this investigation. And then that's why you ask for all of those names and numbers and email addresses at the beginning, because after you're done with that initial contact, you email all of them to cease and desist and to stop talking to you. And if there's a next step, if there's something, an investigative task that they feel they need to do before they close their case, ask them what that is. Ask them when they think they'll be done with it. And then just be done. Like, we have to make this as simple as possible. Child Protective Services, by law and by statute, they are able to investigate allegations of abuse and neglect. They are not here to investigate families, investigate how you live, investigate or make recommendations for your life. And so we got to hold them to task and move the needle back of, like, this is just not what we're going to do here. Like, you've done your job. Now go away.
Wow. So, Amanda, where can the brokers go to find the Resistant Power Guide? Where can we get that information so that people can have access to it?
So you can go to our website, www.operationstopcps.com, and then you click on the link Respond and Empower, and it will be right there on the website. It's an ebook that you can download and go straight to your email, because sometimes families call, they're like, they're coming tomorrow. Like, okay, we'll get the ebook. And then, or you can get the paperback on Amazon, which the link again is right on our website.
Amber, do you have a final question or?
No, since you're doing righteous work though, and I applaud you. And it makes people like me feel guilty. Like, ooh, child, I don't have a stomach for family law, but it don't really matter because it's people out here struggling, and they need the help. And it is messy and it is dirty and it is emotional. But sometimes, especially people like me who have a skill set that's relevant, you can't bury your head in the sand because family law stresses me out. But sometimes, you guys just do it anyway. So thank you for challenging me because, there are people like me. We need to do more than what we're doing. That's for sure.
Yeah, we need you. We need you over here.
And Amanda, I am still over here just struggling with, how do we get the communities that we seek? How do we build the world that we want to live in? And so I am wondering if you will, maybe come back and talk to us in the future and we can talk about, some of those more community minded solutions so that people can actually start to live this thing out. Because in my own door, you've told me that I can keep my door closed and I don't have to answer questions, but it's more than just me. So how do we really get to building those communities?
Yeah. So I'm a member of the African National Women's Organization. And so they have a campaign similar to Operation Stop CPS called Arrest CPS. And so we collaborated because we have these shared goals. But one of the things with the African National Women's Organization is creating communities. And we have what's called Kijijis. And so a Kijiji is African women that unite around the issue of childcare, right? Because that is one of a big issue in our community. And so also in regards to childcare, we agree that the government is never an option for us to call. And so it's being able to create like self-sustaining communities and, just being able to dream that. And so we're excited about that and just being able to build more Kijijis around this country of African women that understand our role in revolutionary life and the fact that we are the ones that have to be able to get out on the forefront of this work to be able to fight back against it. So, I'll definitely be excited to talk more about, the work of African National Women's Organization. And also we have our Black Mothers March that we're starting to plan, for Mother's Day of 2023, May 14th, 2023, where we come together and we bring African, women together to say, Mother's Day is historically supposed to be, a happy time. But for a lot of women that are, faced with not having their children, it's not, right? It's not a happy time. And so how do we, build momentum around that pain and turn it into purpose?
Oh, Amanda, thank you for joining us. And certainly we would love to have you come back and talk about all those things. And I don't know how to spell Kijiji, but I'm going to start to try to Google it so I can look.
I'm going to email it to you. Kijiji.
Some apostrophes and dashes.
Right. Crooked letter, I don't know, but we're going to figure that thing out. But, what we are going to do, brokers, is we're going to put all the information about all of the ways you can contact Amanda and Stop CPS and, the organization. And we will make sure that all of that is available on our website, and we'll make sure that that's available in the information that we share on social media as well. Amanda, it has been a privilege to have you on the show today. We are indeed grateful for your insight. So, Amber, what homework do you have for the brokers today?
So Erika already gave y'all the first piece. You guys need to plug in and follow Operation Stop CPS.
Oh, wait. How we give y'all money? Is it just on y'all's website? Y'all taking them? Oh, sorry. I'm sorry.
Brokers, the website. Yes, if you go to our website on the top right, it'll say Invest Now. You just click right there and you can support our work. Also the sale of our books also supports us. Our merch on our website as well. You can get an Operation Stop CPS t-shirt. All of those things helps us fuel the movement, because we understand that, the targeted population, they do not have the resources to fight back, but we don't want that to stop us from being able to show up.
Yeah. I love it. We need to raffle off some Operation Stop CPS.
I was just like, we need to give away. I was just in my head.
Yes, we're going to do it. And the second part of the homework, so at first, I'm not going to lie, the homework, I was going to send everybody to the National CASA website, but we're not going to do that.
She's sending y'all to the cops.
We're not going to do that. But this is for real what information is power looks like. Realizing
it's transformative.
It's transformative, and you realize you got to pivot. And so my challenge is for everybody who's listening to find 5 or 6 people around you and start a mutual aid society. Mm-hmm. Even if it's just $10 or $15 or $20 a month. So when there are people that you come into contact with and the family is struggling, but they're good people, but the level at which they're struggling makes them at jeopardy for government intervention that is not positive towards the unity and the health and the wholeness of their family. But we can have our own resources to give people money for groceries, to give people money to keep their utilities on, to give people money to help their children have seasonally appropriate clothes, so that we can sort of disrupt some of this interference that comes from things that really are superficial, and they have to do with a lack of resources, not a lack of love. So if you got 5 or 6 people around you and y'all can commit to $5, $10, $20 a month, Open up a bank account and let's start mutual aid so we can start doing it for each other and helping each other out, because we really are all we got, y'all.
Yes,
Indeed.
I love that. I love that from homework. Everybody should do it.
Absolutely. So again, Amanda, thank you for joining us today. We appreciate you and the work that y'all are doing. And y'all, it's clear that navigating life in this oppressive system is more than a challenge. And we know that the path of least resistance is to use the only tools that we've ever been taught about. But we just want you to consider that our liberation will require different tactics than we've used before. More than ever, we need community to help us to advocate for our kids and for kids around us. And let's consider that the state that sanctions violence against us can't be the remedy that we desire. Thanks for tuning in, and we look forward to catching up with you on the next episode of Brokish.
Bye.
All right, good people. Thanks for listening to Brokish. For more episodes, visit us at brokish.com or subscribe, and Brokish will get direct deposited into your favorite podcast app on the 1st and 15th. Share Brokish with your friends and join the conversation on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Music for Brokish is Come Get Some by Blank and Kit. Until next time, goodbye and good luck.